And greatly to say welcome on board. I'm Jerome Post Sonko, and we are getting it done this time around from the topical analysis. And what are we going to look at here? We are going to focus on the rise of domestic violence in Uganda. And if you look at the reason as to why domestic violence is actually rising, one would say the rising cases have actually been attributed to the poverty that has been brought about by COVID-19. Away from that, or before we actually dig into that discussion, into that analysis, how about if you follow us on our Facebook and our Twitter at Smart24TV, and then get us on our website www.smart24tv.com for more of the details in regards to business. And also, you can get us on our YouTube. We are streaming live. YouTube, that is Smart24TV Space Live. Hit the subscription button. Endeavor to. Remember, when you hit the subscription button, we're on a journey to 300 subscribers. We're also streaming live on Facebook as well. So for all of you who are joining us on mainstream and those joining us on social media, thank you very much for joining in. And let's dive into that. If you look at the reports that have been coming up since last year, let's try to break down a little bit with the fact that we've all been in two situations, and what we do understand is, let's try to first break down domestic violence and get to understand what is domestic violence. Now, according to, if you're to look at this, domestic violence or domestic abuse, let's start with domestic violence. Domestic violence is, can be referred to as any type of abuse that occurs in a domestic setting, such as in marriage or cohabitation, and domestic violence, such as marriage. So once you hear something domestic, it takes you back home. So it is violence or any type of abuse that can actually happen from home. And it can actually be whether torture, when it is the man may actually beat up the wife, or it can actually be vice versa. The wife can actually beat up the man, or the husband can actually decide to beat the whole family. And at the end of the day, even the woman can actually decide to beat a child. And if you look at some of the situations that bring the cases of domestic violence and attributed to what brings domestic violence, or what are the causes of domestic violence, you may look at a lot of things. One, mental torture, depression, and then there is Mr. Poverty. You see, poverty, normally people have a saying the youth have a saying, and sometimes if you've been through situations, you can agree into your mind. What you say is by the way. Someone can actually find you out there bya sente nyingi nyonga ulira ayagala sente nainga gwe nawe buli kyala bakimunyiza. So poverty puts you in a situation where you're not stable mentally, where you're depressed, and once you're depressed, you reach a situation you're no longer controllable. Nga tosobola kufugibwa ng'olira buli kyosanga mu kkubo kikunyiiza oba oyagala kuba bukubi muntu luyi. And so that is where we're actually looking at domestic violence. So now there is domestic abuse, according to the United Nations. So United Nations actually sums it up to make it even make more meaning from the violence, to make it look like you've heard of the child abuse and one. So this one, according to the United Nations, refers to it as domestic abuse. You can name it as violence or abuse. And according to the United Nations, domestic abuse or violence or intimate partner violence can be defined as a pattern of behavior in any relationship that has actually been together for some time, or when you have something attached to one another. So if you're to look at domestic violence, the cases have actually risen greatly. Because if you look at anything, it can be defined as a pattern of behavior in any relationship that is used to gain or maintain power and control over an intimate partner. The domestic violence or abuse can be physical, sexual, emotional, economical, or psychological actions or threats of actions that influence another person. And if you're to break this down, you can actually look at the most cases that have been very severe during this time in Uganda include physical abuse, there is sexual, emotional, and then there is economical. I think economical should actually come first. This has actually brought about people breaking up, marriages breaking up, children running out of home to go out to look for money. We have seen many of the children now dropping out of school because of these economical or psychological threats that have influenced or that have brought about violence at the various homes. So if you're to look at the situation, in the first lockdown, police and the human rights activists had actually estimated that we were going to have a lot of cases of domestic violence in Uganda. And it was right, by the way. Because if you could see, we were in sets of lockdown. Back in the day when I do remember the president coming in and telling us we are going out for another 21 days. So the other day comes for another 21 days. So if you look at the 21 days, I think we went in 3 sets of 21 days, plus the other 30 days of the initial. So if you add that, I think we're actually going in a sum of more than 5 months or so. So, and if you look at that, it actually brought on board a number of cases in terms of domestic violence. First and foremost, abantu baali tebakola kirizagana ng'omusajja yabadde gwe babadde bamanye waka nti mu wiiki tulya kanyama tulya kakoko sente ne zitandika okwetoola n'osooka obagulira ab'ewaka n'osooka obagulira ensawo y'ekijanjaalo ne bagiwulira. Sigamba nti ebijanjaalo bibi, naye omanyi obeera ewaka bajja kugamba you need to eat a balanced diet. You're not supposed to be consistent with one meal regardless of how nutritious it is. You need to balance it. Then nobaletera akawunga nokateeka ewaka. Kati obuzibu obwajjiranga nga n'omukazi ayagala kwogera abeeko kyayogera nti naye naawe tosobola kuvako waka olete. You know, in a situation when men were not used to being home all the time, or when parents were not used to being at home all the time, nga ffenna tetwamanyira kweraba. Omanyi ebiseera ebisinga mba temwamanyira kwetunuulira kwebeera kumpi. Mubeera temwagala kuddinganya mize gyammwe, emize gitandika ovaayo gyonna gye mubadde mutalaba. Ate kati we gigenda ne gibeera characterized with poverty, awo nga tagali ajja. Tagali kasita yingira mu bintu bino nga mutandika okwekuba. And normally during COVID you could hear the cases where women had to report their husbands that they were being battered by them. Ng'omusajja kuba nakubira dno ddala, akuba n'ojja n'ebizigiro. Women had cruises, the wives had cruises, and in other cases, it was actually the women beating their husbands up. Kugamba mukazi akuba n'agamba gwe tokyali musajja waka tolina by'oleeta waka. Naye nga nawe tolina kyakukola emirimu bagisibye. So if you look at the rise of domestic violence, I'm driving it in an angle of the poverty line because I'm not saying it is the only cause. But if you look at the 2 years mainly, and according to the story we had here, depending on the women who are torturing or engaging in child abuse. Even police highlighted the poverty part of it, saying that some of these cases are also attributed to the poverty. Olw'ensonga nti abantu kati baavu, ate omuntu oba omwavu, biseera bisinga buli kimu kikunyiiza. Omanyi nti nange wendi wano ojja kwekanganga ne wemanga nfunyemuko akasente katono. Mpulira nga waliwo ebinnuma ebinyiiza nga mpulira njagala obakola ki. So this happened. Now imagine in a situation nga waliwo omuntu nga ye totally ennyingiza ye ntono oba talina waayingiriza. That is where we've actually got into situations where people are actually committing crime others committing suicide. So we are looking at this in a wide gap, and see again na netufunza fenna mumbeera nga olina okubeera nga budgetingira kwegamba. Back in the day we used to listen to survival is for the fittest, but I think it is in this time where that rhyme can actually fit straightforwardly nti omanyirawo nti survival kat is for the fittest. Oba tosobola eggwanga lye tulimu essaawa zino ebintu bizibu nnyo. If you're to look at, according to the United Nations still, violence against women, before we actually break into children also, violence against women is on the rise in Uganda despite the presence of laws and policies to protect victims and survivors. According to the Uganda Police Force's annual crime report, gender-based violence cases that were reported from investigated cases increased by 4%, from 38,651 to 40,258 before the pandemic. Now, this was a rise of 4% before the pandemic. Now, if we can actually draw a little bit to the period of the pandemic to check out and see, if you're to look at this, and if you're to look at this, at least, according to police, at least 1,000, let's now drive it to children. To the police statistics, at least 1,500 children are abused or tortured annually, according to the statistics and investigations. Wali Mubakazi, we saw a rise of 4%. And if it is a rise of 4% from 38,000 to 40,258. Now, in terms of the children, at least 1,500 cases are recorded. So that means if it's at least 1,500 cases, we have more or less. So we're looking at how the world is going to transit. Or we're looking at our transition of the economy. But there are a lot of things that need to be checked. And personality is very crucial. I would think, I personally, that if you're to look at the prevailing cases of domestic violence, let's look at rape. Let's also look at rape. And this time around can actually be attributed to child abuse, because child abuse is actually defilement. Let's put it there, in defilement. We've heard of cases in the lockdown where most of the women were actually reporting their husbands, saying that their husbands are raping them. And most of the people would come out and say, hey, how can a married man rape a wife? And then the women normally come out and say, we were being forced into sex without our consent. Now, this is where I'm actually bringing you. You see, when most of these cases, most of these cases are attributed to poverty, a woman will actually be out there frustrated with the husband. Maybe the husband is no longer providing because of the conditions. And maybe the woman feels like the husband is not entitled to her body anymore, because at the end of the day, you are not providing nothing. Why would you want to lay me down? So you could see, and all these cases were actually growing up. And if you're to follow up on everything, you could see that everything is actually brought about by the COVID situation that has brought a lot of poverty in households. So the domestic violence, look at how children are battered. Kugamba omuzadde awulira obusungu nti omwana amuwadde sente. In most cases omuzadde ayinza okuwa sente. Edda ennyo baali batutumanga ku maduuka. Omuzadde n'akutuma sente n'akuwa 5,000. Nagamba genda oguleko kilo ya sukaali oba omutwalo. Kati oba otambula musajja wattu sente ne zigwa. Omanyi, nothing, if I am to look at the childhood memories that were really scary in an African setting, esookera ddala kuwa sente ogenda ogula ekintu ne zigwa. Kwegamba osooka n'olowooza n'ogamba kakati maama anzise. Omanyi mulimu bw'onga ogamba maama anzise. And there were also times whenever you would go out to play, n'olwayo n'odda olw'eggulo. Era akagambo kali maama anzise. Sinti agenda kutta naye n'abazadde balina engeri gye bagamba ku mwana gwe nkusse. So owulira ebigambo ebyo. So we were used to that situation. I'm trying to refer it to a situation in this era. I'm drawing relevance. Omwana bamutumye sukaali, bamuwadde 15,000. nadde waka n'agamba maama nti sente nzisudde ekituufu kiri nti baba bagenda kukukuba emiggo. And the only challenge is that people are already frustrated. This generation is one that has actually got a lot of depression. People are facing psychological disorders. And this has actually been attributed to the various situations that have been brought about by what is prevailing in the world. Nti omuntu agenda kukwata ng'okuvaako paka ng'omuntu amujjukiza nti that is your bloodline oba oyo mwana wo. So you could see that this torture may be attributed to may actually be attributed to saying that people have a lot of anger, but you never know where the frustration comes from. And frustration attributed to money hits different, trust me. So at the end of the day, I think we can actually say these are some of the cases that are continuously prevailing. And with the continuous cases, you've been able to see that most of the videos that have been recorded normally on social media, we've gone ahead to see women engaging in various activities nga bali kuba abaana nga abazadde bakuba abaana nga omuzadde akubira ddala omwana empi. Videos tuzirabya balala ng'omwana amwambudde amukuba kibooko. So people have actually the other time we were in a situation where maids were actually torturing the children, and regardless of the situation, where maids will actually tell you that they are also being tortured by their bosses, and I hear they receive little pay, but one will still consider that the other is a child. You know, normally when you're with a child, oba omwana omuto, a toddler, waliwo abaana abato ogenda kweka nga stage omwana gy'alimu eba beginner stage oba oyiga buyizi nti ne ogenda ku university, the first semester or the first year of study, your modules or your course units are always a bit simpler because oli ku baby stages, but the more you're climbing nga batandika okwongeramu. So our abantu kye balina okusooka okumanya nti these are children, and we are in a generation where we are, the government is telling us we are securing our future. So if people are securing the future, then that means you as a parent, you are entitled to also play a big part to secure the future of your child, the future of your grandchild. But how are you going to secure the future of that child? By brutalizing them. And how are you going to secure them? By showing them a different life that is going to mentally change their, that is actually going to change their mindset towards life. Because once you grow up, what I do know about children is that once they grow up from a harsh world, they tend to experience a harsh upbringing. So mubongo bwabwe, personality yabwe ekula n'obukyayi. They grow up with a lot of hatred. And when someone grows up with a lot of hatred, trust me, it is not easier, or it is not easy for them to come out at the top. So I pretty much guess it is high time we put this to an end. It starts with us. I pretty much say so. And according to police, they strongly condemn cruel and inhuman acts of child torture, saying that there is no justification whatsoever. They say that all children rely on parents, adults and guardians for their survival, for their well-being, which rights must all be observed. So imagine if someone is actually benefiting on you and then it is you who is actually putting them down. It is not good at all. And during the press, the police spokesperson Fred Enanga says that such acts are due to poverty and failure to meet the family needs. And this is quite evident. So when someone actually fails to, to bring on board something at home, and normally we have very aggressive children these days. This generation is a tricky one. Akana kaimira ne kagamba tata nze njale nnuma bali abawali bali mukulya nkoko ffe tulidde mukene oba tulidde ebijanjalo oba ekinyeebwa okumala emyezi 4. N'owulira nga kakumanyidde nnyo n'okakuba oluyi omala n'ojjayo omuggo n'okuba omulala ajjayo paasi n'akuba omwana ku mutwe, abalala ne bakwata obugalo bw'omwana ne bamwokya. So it still depends. And of course, that starts with us. And if you look at the rising cases, I hope if you are a business owner out there, by the way, the growth of your business also depends on how you treat others. Because God is the giver of blessings. Normally, He blesses the good-hearted ones more. So if you want more blessings in your business, treat the people right, the way you're supposed to be treated. I'm Jerome Paul Sonko. This is Smart Means Business, and this is Smart 24 TV. As we drive your business after the break, Andrew Barije is coming back to bring to you the latest from the world of business entertainment. Stick around.